Well, Tom Andrews is a former US congressman who's the UN Special Rapporteur on human rights in Myanmar. He joins us now from Fairfax, Virginia. Could the deaths of these two protesters perhaps signal a bloody crackdown in the country, reminiscent of what we've seen in the past?
Well, it's a nightmare scenario, and you put your finger right on it. This military is capable of just about anything. We've seen them massacre protesters in the past in the streets. They've killed monks in saffron robes protesting. And of course, we've seen what they're capable of doing with the ethnic minorities, including the Rohingya ethnic minority. So this is a very dangerous situation. And the nightmare is made even more frightening by the fact that they are now deploying these army troops, these deployments of, in this case, the 33rd Light Infantry Division. This was the very division that is accused of and was actually involved, we know, in massacres against the Rohingya ethnic minority, tremendous atrocity crimes. So now these hardened soldiers are being deployed from the coastal areas and from the areas like Rakhine State in the north into these urban areas to confront these protesters who are peaceful protesters. There's no question about this.
I'm just wondering if there is a limited media presence in the country, or at least media coverage of the story, plus concerns about the effect of civil unrest and killings on investment in the country. Does that perhaps mean there's less of an appetite to resort to the heavy-handed tactics and repression of the past, or does that not make much difference?
Well, I don't know what makes a difference to these generals and to this military. We know what they're capable of. And so what we're doing is trying to make very, very clear in the strongest possible terms that there's going to be a price to pay by the international community for anything that they do, atrocities or even trying to get away with this coup d'etat, destroying what was a developing democracy. The Security Council has met, the Human Rights Council of the United Nations has met and issued strong statements. The General Assembly should be meeting fairly soon. And even strong allies of the generals, China, have been issuing some encouraging...
But I have to ask you, despite the strong statements, it's just not clear how, well, what steps, for example, the Security Council will take to actually address the situation, because the military leaders are not going to listen to these strong statements. They're just going to ignore them. It really seems as though foreign governments have struggled to come up with a robust response to what's happening in Myanmar.
That's a very fair point. And what has to happen now is action, starting with very strong, tough, targeted economic sanctions on the generals. They need to be paying a price for what they're doing. An international arms embargo is another important step that needs to be taken. But we have to hit the generals where they will hurt. And we know that money is very important to them. They very much want to be wealthy. And so sanctioning them, focused, targeted, tough sanctions, we know have worked in the past, and it's worth giving them a real shot right now.
Sanctions can be a blunt tool, though. Is it possible to adopt measures while at the same time insulating the people from any suffering or the broader economy from serious damage?
No, you're exactly right. There are ways to do this. We're urging that a scalpel be used, not a club, in imposing these sanctions, and make it very clear that we don't want to hurt people, that regular people in the country. They've suffered enough. But those targeted sanctions that can hurt the generals, cut off their own supply of funds and assets, freeze them, and have a price to pay that's focused directly and specifically on the generals and their enterprises and their economic enterprises, and not the people in general. It's very, very important.
Tom Andrews, UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Myanmar, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.